Hello again, Javatarians. We're going to look at accessing and evaluating and printing arrays again, but this time we're going to use loops. And frankly, this is why we learned loops in the first place, for a lot of the reason anyway. With an array, we want to print items over and over and over again. And how do you do things over and over and over again in Java? With a loop. So let's take a look at array loop 1 and 2. So array loop 1 creates an array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, calls it nums. And here's the two ways we access and print elements in an array. The first is with a for loop. And again, the index starts at 0. That would be that element 1 there. And it goes up until, but not including the length of the array. There's 7 items in the array, so that's the length of nums. We want to go positions 0 through 6. So as long as we use less than nums.length, we'll stop at the right point. We increase the index by 1 each time. And we print out, on a separate line, array nums and the whatever's in this spot called index. So 0 through 6. So we get nums 0 through nums 6. Prints them out each one on its own separate line. Using a for loop with the variable index, keeping track of where we are in the loop. The other way of printing out items in an array is called a for each loop. It looks a little bit different, but it actually serves the same purpose. You notice there's no reference to the length of the array here, but what it does is, well, it actually reads for each integer, and we give it a name item, in the array nums. So the colon is really just read as in the array. Item is what we're going to call each individual element in the array. Nums is the name of the array. So for each item in the array nums, print out that item. So that's the purpose of the name here. Take each element in the array, call it item, and then what we're going to do with it is print it out. And you'll notice you get exactly the same result. Now there's no reference to the index because we don't care about individual items really. We know we're going to do the exact same thing to everything in the array. So we don't reference index or length. We just say for each item in the array nums, print it out. It's called a for each loop. And literally because it'll do the same thing for each element in the array. And so a for loop, you need to talk about the position in the array starting at 0, stop right one element before length, and increase by 1 each time. For each, you don't reference the position, you just say for each item in the array nums, do whatever is in that code. And you can also assign values to an array with a loop. So array loop 2 creates an integer array. It's got six integers in it. And as we know, since there's no values assigned, they all get zeros. Well, we can change that using a loop. We're starting at spot 0. We're going up to, but not including spot 6 because it's 0 through 5. Moving one spot each time. And what we're doing is assigning that spot the value, whatever the index is, times 4. 0 times 4 through 5 times 4. And here we have that the for loop, not a for each loop, a for loop that prints out the array, starting at 0, going up to but not including length. Pilot. And we run it. And it prints it out. So this first loop assigns the values 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. This second loop prints it out, one element at a time, 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. So when we do things to arrays, we will always use a loop pretty much all the time, because we want to look at or print out or manipulate all the items in the array. A loop is what does that for us. Similarly, we could do the same thing with an array of strings. The for each loop would still work. For each item in the array words, print out that item. It would print out each one on a separate line. Counting and totaling array values. We did a lot of that with characters and strings. Again, string is a type of array. So we're going to go back and talk about counting the values in an array again. So again, you must use a loop to access all the items in the array. And what we're doing is looking for certain values. So include an if statement to check for the specified value, and a variable with which to count each of the variable's occurrences. So in pseudocode, make a loop that goes through all the array items. If the current item you're looking at is equal to the search value, increase the count by 1. And when you're done with the loop, you will have the total number of times the item you're looking for occurs in the array. For example, start out with a count of 0. Okay. If the item matches the value that you're looking for, add 1 to the count. Okay. And then typically you will return that, or perhaps print that count value. You went to all the trouble of finding it. So, arrayCount.java. So what we have here is it's split up into separate methods. So let's run it. Okay. We have this array with a whole bunch of 7s in it, and then we go through and count the number of 7s. Happens to be 5. So let's take a look at our code here. Okay. The void main is where the program always starts. It creates the array nums. Okay. The method printIt prints it out. That's up here. The method printIt uses a for each loop and prints out each item with a space in between. The method countit takes the array nums and counts how many 7s there are. So the input array it takes in as a parameter is nums. Okay. It takes in the 7. And here's the loop we just looked at. We have a count that starts at 0. For every item in that array, if the item equals the value that we're looking for, add 1 to the count. It then returns the count, which in this case is 5. And that's why a 5 gets printed for the countit. So we did split it up into separate methods, but in any case, this method is the one that counts how many of the value there are. The printIt method, well, it's really just the loop to print out the array. And the void main is the main part that gets run. So that is how we use the counter to count how many times a value appears. Now, you may ask, how could we possibly total up all the elements in a value? Well, I'll give you a big hint. That was the second big problem on the worksheet, the Check for Understanding worksheet. That chunk of code shows you how to add up all the items in an array. So in case you didn't realize that from working through the worksheet, if you need to add up all the items in an array, that chunk of code will do that for you. Now I want you to move on to problems 1 and 2 in the project. They are the Array Funhouse 1 and Array Funhouse 2. Yep. It describes the problems on the documents, what the methods have to do. The runners here are set up for you. One thing I will suggest strongly is look through this next section called Deleting Array Values. These next 5 or 6 slides, up to number 39, will talk about how to delete the values from an array. That is part of the problem in Array Funhouse 1. It will give you a good hint on how to approach that problem. Thank you again. Sorry I'm sick. Hope I'll see you again on Tuesday. I'll give your test back then.